Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 21. It's our Blackjack episode of The Agency Way, a weekly blab series focused on helping marketers learn from subject matter experts within a marketing agency and beyond. What I can tell you today is that I have the privilege of being the subject matter expert. Woohoo! So isn't that fun? And last week, for those of you that couldn't join us, what we talked about was LinkedIn. Personal branding on LinkedIn, in addition to the concept of social selling. And so within Room 214, we've got an expert program. And what that means is that there are people within the agency that are designated experts in different areas. So there's a Snapchat expert, there's a Facebook advertising expert, and the list goes on. And I happen to be the LinkedIn expert. I say that humbly because who can keep up with it all, right? But my hope is to really continue from where I left off last week. And that was just sharing some slides and some concepts from a conference I had the privilege of presenting at to roughly somewhere between 220, 240 salespeople. So there is a blog post that's available with the embedded slides and a summary of last week, but we're going to go ahead and pick this up and continue the presentation because we only got so far. And so I'm going to go ahead, as you guys can see, I'm doing a screen share, which is oddly annoying when it's just like what I'm looking at now, but I am going to share my screen here. And hopefully this will be better for everybody. Personal branding. I realized that I had my little script up in front for everybody to see as well. And we were on episode 19 according to the script. So it's funny because I don't think we're really using a script anymore other than that intro. Anyway, this is not the place I want to be. So let me just get to the place I want to be. So I think this blab today will either be could be pretty short, but just depending on what questions there are, it could get a little more interesting. So I'm just going to encourage everybody to ask questions for those of you that are on. This is where we left off last time. So I'll just start off with this quote from Zig Ziglar: "You will get all you want in life if you help enough other people get what they want." Last time we touched on the idea of, really to receive with social media in general, you really want to be able to give. And so general guidelines when we think about this concept of social selling on LinkedIn is providing value, right? And so if we're actually using the publishing platform, if we're one of the 1 million people out of the 433 million people on LinkedIn that will publish content, this is what we want to do. We want to provide value. The idea of posting once per day, that's not publishing on the LinkedIn, Pulse platform once per day. That is at least getting in there and doing an update. Viewing profiles of people you want to connect with. That's a good thing. Why? Because when you view profiles of people you want to connect with, even if you're not connecting with them at that moment, they will see that you viewed their profile, which can be intriguing. And certainly not a surprise when you do try to connect with them. Getting familiar with the mobile app and LinkedIn is also very important because the desktop app continues to more closely mirror the mobile app, and there's some inherent advantages with the mobile app in terms of how you can connect with people on LinkedIn without going through the process that's still on the desktop, where you essentially have to go through a little more of a permission process. And then let's just go ahead and get into this. And I would just encourage people, since I can't see the screen and I'm really relying on Erica to help me in terms of questions that come up. Erica, feel free to interrupt me.
Will do.
Cool. So getting right into this, what I've done is I've highlighted some lessons here for something called the Influencer Blueprint. And you guys could Google this and go and pay for it and read it. What I did is basically looked at it and said, okay, well, here's the summary of where I believe these points are valuable. And so just so you know, the point of reference on this is about going out and connecting with media contacts. So for example, if you're trying to be an authority or an influencer in a particular area, and you want to connect with the media via LinkedIn, this is kind of the recommendation. And the idea is that you need 7 to 10 touch points to establish trust. And what you really want to do is be able to build a sales funnel with LinkedIn. And what that means is a goal of 400 plus contacts per folder. And so when we talk about per folder, what does that mean? I'm going to get into live demo mode just so I can show you what I mean by that really quickly. And this gets into just kind of a best practice with LinkedIn anyway. So if I go to my LinkedIn profile here, let's just go into my network. We'll go my connections. Hopefully everybody can see this.
We can, yeah.
Okay, cool. So if I look at my connections, what you will see is, so this gentleman right here, Jason Veith. Now what I can do is I can essentially come here to this little tag link and I can click on that. And what you'll see is I've got some areas here where I can tag him to a group. Now, if I want to add a new folder, I can just click add new tag. And for the sake of this demo, I'm just going to say White Wave. So this is White Wave Foods, the company, right? Mm-hmm. I can save this. And now I've tagged Jason, who's a senior vice president and general manager of the White Wave Foods company. He is now tagged. And I could click on this tag and I could see, you know, essentially all of the people in this folder, if you will, that are tagged White Wave. And so, you know, back to our demo here or the slides, the best practice, you know, this idea is you're tagging people over time and you're essentially creating folders so that you have a way to organize people within your LinkedIn.
I do have a question though.
Yeah.
So do you custom make your own tags, or does it have to be something that's already existing within the LinkedIn network?
No, you customize your own tag. Okay. And so even with what I just did right there, you know, I customized a tag there. I created a tag called White Wave, and I dropped him in it.
Great.
So, you know, this gets, there are other applications out there, third-party applications that will allow you to essentially send a message in a more strategic way to a group of people. And you could do that by tag, for example. So if I wanted to email everybody, you know, in my LinkedIn network that's part of White Wave, and by the way, I would only do this if I had a very specific value that I was trying to share with them. You know, maybe it's the latest research on organic foods or something that I believe they haven't seen or something that's really unique. That would be a way for me to organize those people and get a message out to them. Nice. So, one of the key takeaways that we covered last time was the open rates with LinkedIn messages are higher than email inbox open rates. And so, you know, if the question is, well, why would we want to message people through LinkedIn or try to, you know, do that? Well, there's one answer.
Yes.
So, and then this idea of sending 150 invitations per month, that's just growing your LinkedIn network. You know, this is a point of reference. This isn't like a hard, you must do this, but it's like, I know as an individual, when I get recommendations about what I should be doing in any particular social network, I love to be able to look at benchmarks or points of reference for people or companies that have gone ahead of me and said, you know, here were our goals. Here's what we did. And so this is just a good point of reference. This idea of leaving a gap of 5 to 7 business days before you reach out to somebody for the first time, that's pretty interesting. And, you know, again, this is another organization who's done a lot of testing to figure out the best engagement specific to people in the media. And I have a feeling that, you know, this is probably related to the fact that oftentimes when people connect with you on LinkedIn or even Twitter, you know, think about how people are connecting with you. It seems often they're shooting back something like, thanks for the connection, download my free ebook here, or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And not to bust on those people, but it's like, I don't know, you start getting really conditioned to this like automated feeling of being marketed to. And so I suspect that, the best practice here is related to the fact that you're not just immediately reaching out to somebody when they connect with you. You're giving it a period of time. And then this idea of scripting no less than 4 emails as template messaging that you can customize. I'm going to cover an example of this a little later in the presentation. So I'm going to cruise past this. So another best practice is really getting into buyer personas. And when you think about buyer personas, a lot of organizations have buyer personas, right? These are like the ideal people that are your target customer. And I just bring this up because a lot of individuals, I don't think they're necessarily thinking about this when they're creating content inside of LinkedIn. And so the idea when you're creating content that's useful, you really want to be able to tilt that content towards your potential customer, your potential buyer. And so coming up with personas is a great best practice and way to do that. And we don't need to spend a lot of time on this. This is relevant to a lot of marketing that you'll do, but I just wanted to bring it up because it is relevant. You're trying to create content that is appealing to people. And so really getting in their shoes, being empathetic towards what your potential customers are looking for is just a best practice. So for example, here, if we take Chris, we want to do a little bit of a deeper dive with Chris. What does that look like? Getting into, listing his background, potential titles that he might have, his pain points, where is he getting his information? What are his needs, his information resources, et cetera. And so just being able to map out your ideal buyer or persona like this is very helpful in terms of how you'll go about creating content, or at least building strategy on how you'll create content for people, even inside of LinkedIn. I'm going to cruise past some of these slides because people can review them, but this gets into, okay, cool. Now you know who your personas are. What about their buyer's journey? What does it look like when they're at an awareness stage, when they're at a consideration stage, when they're at a preference stage? So this is all dialogue and a way to map out the buyer's journey that, again, is helpful when it comes to you producing content that might be very relevant to your potential buyer. So this is a lot of text. I'm just going to cruise past this. So I love the Content Marketing Institute, and I just wanted to touch on this idea that they really push. And I've mentioned this before on past blabs, but Content Marketing Institute, and then this really does fly in the face of a lot of what we will do as an agency and what a lot of marketing teams will think of, which is, oh my gosh, we've got to be on every social network, or we're relevant in all these channels. I'm not here to say, no, that's not the case. Well, I guess I am a little bit. I'll just say, no, that's not the case. But what I will say is that Content Marketing Institute has really taken a deep dive into this area. And basically what they've said is that the media companies have already figured this out decades ago, and you should really focus deeply on one channel and be very consistent in terms of your message and what you're putting out there for your particular target customer. And the reason I bring this up is because we're always careful as an agency. We never just want to put out a list of tactics or recommendations and say, okay, now go do this and you're going to be wildly successful. The key bullet point here is the 4th one, where it says think long term. This idea of 15 to 18 months to experience any real sustainable success. That's a pretty serious thing to think about. And I like the Content Marketing Institute has basically come out and said this because it means that I don't have to be the bad guy. Somebody else has already said this, and it's really true. And so I would say the key takeaway from this slide is really starts with that idea of long term. And then, of course, this idea of sharing 4 pieces of content from others. For every self-serving or personalized update, consider sharing 1 other from someone else. Those are just best practices on social media in general. So the rest of this presentation is really about looking at other experts again that are out there really active inside of LinkedIn. They're either teachers or instructors when it comes to LinkedIn best practices, or they're guys like Jason Miller that have just really forged an amazing path of marketing from a personal branding perspective. And so now that Jason actually works for LinkedIn, which is relatively new, these were 3 takeaways that I got out of the Social Media Marketing World Conference last month. Just this idea that, when you're doing updates on LinkedIn, and again, not just using the publishing platform, but just daily updates, having links in those make your performance 45% better. Using stats and quotes always gets the best engagement. Stats slightly more than quotes. And then this idea that 74% of prospects choose a company that was first to help them along their buyer's journey. That's just a huge thing to keep in mind, because I think it's really easy to kind of get in this mindset like, oh my gosh, all I'm doing is running around helping people. When you think about, well, where's the return on investment? Is this really going to, turn into something? It's like, this is kind of a fun stat to look at. Vivec Van Rosen also presented at this Social Media Marketing World Conference. And she had a lot of great things to say. Some of her key takeaways was the idea of repurposing blog posts inside of the LinkedIn publishing platform. She was very careful to say, look, don't just duplicate the content, but whether you're summarizing, using links, definitely make sure that you do that. And then ending your post with a short bio and even a call to action can be really helpful. And, thanks to Viveka, I've been doing this myself, and it makes a lot of sense, right? You could create some really great content inside of LinkedIn, and just because somebody reads that content and shares it doesn't mean they actually know anything about what you do or who you are beyond your picture and maybe your headline that shows up alongside that content that you publish. So just being a little more proactive with that, making it easier for people to share your content is a great tip. Getting into this idea of how you reach out to people, even with emails too. Gabe is just, I mentioned this last time, really a master. He leverages this idea of the 3x3 social outreach strategy. And the lesson here is 3 things about your buyer in 3 minutes. And so if you just spend a little bit of time looking at somebody's LinkedIn profile and you bother to reach out to them in a more meaningful way, other than just clicking to send an invite, this is really the way to do it. And so we've got an example here. As you can see, if I reach out to a guy named Dan, hey, first I'll just say it will be interesting to see if the new Broncos QB will play this season. Okay, so right, the assumption here is that I've looked at Dan's LinkedIn profile. I see that he's a Broncos fan. Mm-hmm. He put something in there. And then I say, good to see your company made the top 5 list for whatever. As I've got a watchful eye on the industry myself, just read Gartner's report on whatever, I'd love to connect. Right. So this is an example of me doing exactly the strategy, right? I've referenced something from his personal life, his business, and his industry. And this is obviously going to be much more interesting in terms of how other people reach out to Dan. It shows that I've taken a little bit of time to pay attention to him specifically, as well as his business. So when I look at a tactic like this, when I go to reach out to Dan the second time, what will I say? And maybe it's like, hey, Dan, thanks for connecting. Remember the Gartner, you might remember the Gartner report that I referenced in my last message to you. Here's actually the thing that I liked about it, right? And so there's, or maybe you're linking to something about that report. But again, the idea is to provide value, to talk about something that's very relevant to him, as opposed to a few paragraphs inside of a LinkedIn message that has links to what you're selling that looks very templatized and cookie cutter. Melanie also had some great tips from the conference. She was a speaker as well. She was really supporting this idea of why you would publish long form content inside of LinkedIn. So adding value, Also knowing that your connections are notified every time you publish in the platform, which we talked about last time, just being able to connect with people in a way that goes beyond how you might with a blog. And then knowing that your network can share your content, and going down to the second and third level. Having an opportunity to show up in LinkedIn Pulse is certainly a big advantage, and that's very relevant to the mobile part of LinkedIn, and then positions you as an authority, right? So 4 ideas for generating relevant content. We touched on personas, knowing something about the industry, but here are some other really simple ways to know, gosh, what's relevant content that I can be writing about. The recent activity page is one. I actually like these other 3 bullet points that follow better. So identifying group posts with the most engagement. Looking at SlideShare, which has over like 44 million presentations or something ridiculous like that, and being able to know what SlideShare presentations are really getting a lot of play. This is great, right? You don't have to figure out what content's going to be most interesting to people. It's all right there for you. And then looking at the title of those SlideShare presentations and the topic as well can really clue you into maybe a title you should have or a topic you should be talking about. And then of course, just posting questions to your social network, asking people straight up, what is interesting to you? And so I'm going to close with this final slide, and maybe we can take some questions or get into live demo mode if anybody wants to jump into it. But James Clark, my co-founding partner, wrote a white paper back in 2008 called The 7 Deadly Sins of Social Media. It's funny because I dusted that thing off, so to speak, and I took a look at it, and sure enough, everything still really applies to this day. And so pride, this idea that leading with humility is super important. If you make a mistake, which we all do, by the way, just correct it and move on. Gluttony, don't bring Vegas into your social media. And so this is a funny thing, because when I gave the conference a few weeks ago, one of the things that the VP of marketing there told me is, he said, it's important that we just touch on the basics, because we do actually have people that will put on their social network, something in reference to the hangover that they had, or something that just should not be brought into your social media.
Yeah.
So this idea of sloth: plan your work and work your plan. Be diligent and disciplined. So that's really easily said. It's often not easily done. And then envy: someone is always doing it better than you. This saying that we have in my house, that my wife and I will repeat to our kids very often: comparison is the enemy of contentment. And so the reason this is really relevant is because it is easy to look at, somebody who's doing something really well and actually get discouraged and think, oh my gosh, this person's like all over it, and I'll never catch up to this. And so, I always want to encourage people that you've got to start somewhere. And if you do stick with it, you will experience success. Giving credit where credit is due, also a huge thing, when it comes to referencing others and their content. There's so much content out there. Reinventing the wheel is ridiculous. If you have a point of view on other people's content and you want to share it, the idea here is simply just to give them credit. And then this idea of lust: don't fall into the trap of kissing butts. It's just kind of funny. We see this a lot with social media influencers, where this happens. And I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on this, but it is a best practice. It is a deadly sin, I should say. And then wrath: no matter how much something might put you off, avoid putting other companies and people down. And in this fun world of political chaos that we live in, it's easy to get emotional and want to talk about things on your social media, or even make little comments that where your social network is, especially LinkedIn, not necessarily the place to do it.
Yeah.
So hopefully this is helpful. And there's some key takeaways, some tips that you all got out of this. I know that it's kind of tough to go through some of this, and it's a lot of information, and to really understand how it applies to you can be a challenge. But like I said, hopefully there's something here that's a great takeaway, a good nugget, something that you can start doing today. And I'd love to hear any questions if anybody has any. Let's see if I can get out of this screen sharing mode on Blab. Kick.
Like a carnival house.
I know. Okay, it says kick. Trying it. There we go. Oh, so much better. Cool. So yeah, I guess we're at a half an hour. Maybe it took a little longer than I thought. Do you have any questions, Erica? Was stuff seem pretty clear to you?
It was so good to me. And I've already confessed this, but I've been on LinkedIn since 2005, and I just finished my profile last Friday based on the first half of your discussion. So I thought it was extremely, extremely helpful. I think it's super practical, and you have a lot of good tips.
Cool.
I think if I have any questions, it would really be, what I see a lot in my social networks is people leveraging one network for another. So for instance, there are 1 million people who will connect with me on Twitter, and the first thing I get from them is, you should get on my LinkedIn, or you should, follow me on this other place. And are there any best practices on that? Like, is it too much to have this automated reply, or do you really build an audience that way?
I keep hearing more often from, and it is from people like Gabe. These are guys I listen to because they're just in this constantly, don't do these auto replies that invite people to your other networks. However, I also look at those auto replies and those networks, and I think, maybe a reason people are doing this is because it actually works, right? So I think, when you look at the outcome that you are trying to achieve with the social media work that you're doing, that's a huge part of it. And I see a lot of these influencers, their ultimate outcome is to build a subscriber list because they're selling a training, or a course, or a plugin, a piece of software, something like that. And so they're pretty systematic about how they're inviting other people to social networks. I think that, we're always a huge proponent of testing frequently and then making adjustments as a result of what you learn. So there are no hard rules on it. I can tell you so far, I'm not doing it. I'm not inviting, when somebody follows me on Twitter, I'm not telling them, hey, check me out on Facebook and LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's your Twitter person. Yeah. Right. I get it. Yeah,
exactly. So again, not saying it's wrong, but my outcome isn't to try to just grow every social network I have as fast as I can with as many people either. And
okay. And so my other question would be, I'm trying to start to post a little bit just to put some content out there. And I've noticed that they have a lot of suggested topics out there, which I assume they're giving to the entire network of people who are in your space. I wondered if that would be almost frowned upon. Like, if you're not a creative person, you just would take their question and run with it and post something about it, or if that's something that people are doing. I have no idea. Do you know?
You're talking about just getting suggestions on the content that
you're
going to write about?
LinkedIn, on the publishing part, you put your own content out there, and then there's here's a suggested topic for you. You should write about this, and it's from LinkedIn. I don't know if that's something that people are doing, or if that's new, or do you know anything about it?
Yeah, the thing about that is obviously it's all algorithmic, which means that it is based on real data, right? So my response to that would be, I'll take a little note on this. If I have something to say, if I've got a point of view and something to back it up, and I believe I can offer value on that particular topic, then great. Add that to your editorial calendar. Do a little research, dig into that, and see if you can actually test. Create some content and see what happens. If it's going into an area where I'm really not an expert and I feel like I don't have much to add, I'm not gonna fake it.
Yeah. That gets right back to what you were talking to before about the content tilts. Like, you're either giving something of value, or you're just, putting content out there for content's sake.
Yeah. And oftentimes we will see that, we all have our own language in terms of so for example, I had a discussion just the other day. We were talking about visual storytelling, and it's like, well, what does that even mean to people? Should we just call it creative services? And so, maybe this isn't the best example, but you're getting into LinkedIn, you're trying to figure out what content you're going to write about. You start typing, and now suggestions come up. So you have to ask yourself, okay, well, does that suggestion actually refer to a topic that I call something different? Where I have a point of view and it's relevant.
Yeah.
So there's that. And I think, I know we got to bounce here, but I think moving forward when it comes to LinkedIn, the feedback that we've gotten and just some things that I've heard from people as far as where we take this next, it's like, hey, Jason, thanks for the personal branding and the tips, and this is all good. But as a company, what should I be thinking of? When I think about my company page and showcase pages, and even the opportunity to advertise on LinkedIn and the various forms of advertising on LinkedIn, and what's working best, where do I go next? And so I think that's really going to be an area that we focus on for a follow-up lab, is just, offering a little more advice from the company perspective. I think, by the way, it should all start at the personal branding level anyway, because behind the company LinkedIn page are the people. And so you want to make sure that the leaders within that company, their pages are really squared away, and they look like, they're paying attention. And this LinkedIn, because it's used so heavily as a recruiting tool too, that's one reason in and of itself that leaders within a company need to look really dialed in. So anyway, whole different topic, whole different discussion. But hopefully this was helpful for people. I don't see any questions here, which is fine. So I'll stop the record and just want to say, hey, everybody, thanks for joining us on another episode of The Agency Way. Join us at 11:30 a.m. next Thursday. We'll pick the topic, get the links out, and we'll also post on today's as well. So enjoy the rest of the week. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.